Okay, we're ready. Thank you.
All right, the time is 6:45 and I am calling to order this special meeting of Emeryville City Council. It's March 2nd, 2021, and please bear with me while I read this little prologue to our meeting. I'd like to state for the record that this meeting is being conducted by teleconference pursuant to the Brown Act waivers provided for under the Governor's executive order in response to the COVID-19 state of emergency. During the public health emergency, City Hall is closed to the public. The agenda states that the public may view the meeting that is being live streamed online and on ETV Channel 27 and provide comment by submitting an online comment form, which will then be read into the record by staff. The comment form can be accessed by going to our main City of Emeryville website at emeryville.org and clicking on the council agendas and videos. Once there, you will see a link entitled Submit an Online Speaker Card. The public also has the option of participating in tonight's meeting via Zoom and may provide public comment during the meeting using the Raise Your Hand feature visible on your screen, or if you're calling in, press star 9. The Zoom call-in information was provided on the posted agenda as well as via e-notification and on social media. And at this time, I will turn back to the clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders.
Here.
Councilmember Medina.
Here.
Councilmember Pats.
Here.
Vice Mayor Donahue.
Here.
And Mayor Martinez.
I am here, thank you. And at this time, I will look to my colleagues for a motion and a second to approve the final agenda for this meeting.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Member Pats and a second from Member Medina. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Pats.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Donahue.
Aye.
And Mayor Martinez.
Aye. And are there any ex parte communications anyone would like to report for this meeting? Seeing none, that moves us to public comment. Now is the time for public comment. Anyone who wishes to make comments related to the items not on the agenda or on the consent agenda should have submitted your online speaker card by now. 3 minutes will be allowed for the city clerk to read your comments into the record. If you're participating in tonight's meeting via Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature visible on your screen, or if you're calling in, press star 9. And at this time, I will ask the city clerk whether any comments have been received via the online comment card or whether anyone has raised their hand to make audio comments.
I have no submitted speaker cards and I see no raised hands at this time.
Okay, I'm just giving it a second in case anyone would like to raise their hands. And seeing no one, I am going to close public comment, and that will bring us to our first item, which is the Budget Advisory Committee's annual report on committee goals, principles, and accomplishments for calendar year 2020 and proposed committee priorities for calendar year 2021. And Brad, do you have an introduction for this?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Today, Bill Reuter, Chair for the Budget Advisory Committee, will be doing the presentation, and I'll be available for any comments or questions that you might have afterwards.
Great, thank you, Brad, and welcome, Bill.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Councilors, and I hope there's some citizens from Emeryville checking in to see what we're up to. It's a pleasure to report what the Budget Advisory Committee has been up to and what we're going to be concentrating on in the near future. During the calendar year 2020, our major accomplishments and work, we reviewed the pension trust quarterly investment reports and monitored investment portfolio. Let me make a comment. I know that the city councilors are fully aware of this, but something for the general public if anyone's tuned in. One of our problems that we have to keep our eye on is that CalPERS, our principal funder for these unfunded pension liabilities down the road, if it falls short of meeting its budget, its own investment requirements, then that causes troubles for us down the road, and we have to be ready to spend additional monies to make sure that our pension system is sound. And so the Budget Advisory Committee keeps very close track of how our investment portfolio is doing to support that. We discussed funding strategies for pension and other post-employment benefits. We reviewed the mid-year budget amendments for the fiscal year 2019 and 2020. We reviewed the fiscal year 2020-2021 operating budget, including updated financial policies and long-term financial projections. And we reviewed our 5-year capital improvements program. Next slide, please. These are our primary priorities for the year 2021. We want to closely monitor city revenues, expenditures, and reserve funds to ensure prudent spending and long-term fiscal sustainability. As you all know, we're facing some impacts on our revenue flow. Our expenses are staying the same or going up, and our revenue flow, especially from sales taxes, hospitality taxes, and so forth, are dropping. Therefore, we have some serious problems to contend with. I'd like to point out a couple of things for the general public in this regard. You'll notice that one of our concerns is to ensure prudent reserve balances. I'm happy to report that over the years I've been serving either initially the Finance Advisory Committee, now the Budget Advisory Committee. When I first joined this operation, our budget reserves were down in the sort of 20 to 25% category. I'm happy to report that our prudent reserves are at 50% of a fiscal year expected expenditures. One of the other things that we'll be paying close attention to is trying to identify new sources of revenues. And let me point out at this stage that we're trying to maintain and keep close contact with the Economic Development Advisory Committee, let them know where we stand financially, our sense of how things are going financially, and keeping a very close track of what their plans are for stimulating the city's economy. And finally, we're interested in trying to reduce the city's unfunded liabilities. That's something we'll be watching very, very closely. Next slide, please. Calendar year secondary priorities: assess impacts of new revenue measures, the cannabis tax and Measure F in particular, monitor pension and OPEB and review funding strategies. We're going to be reviewing budget and financial policies to ensure comprehensive financial management. And we'll be, of course, closely reviewing mid-cycle budget amendments, master fee schedule, and investment policy. I'm happy to report that it's a lively committee. The members read the documents carefully. We appreciate the presence of the liaison from City Council, John Bowders. Appreciate the presence always of the City Manager, Christine Daniels, present with us, answering our questions and asking us questions. That's a good, fruitful interchange. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Great slide, and we always appreciate the work of your committee and the time and consideration that you put into looking over the city's finances. At this time, I will see if any of my colleagues have any clarifying questions on the work that you've done or your priorities for the next year. Okay, seeing no questions, I will check in with our city clerk to see if anyone has submitted electronic comment or if anyone has their hand raised in the meeting. And to remind folks how to do that, use the raise hand feature if you are using Zoom, or if you're calling in, please press *9 to be recognized. Madam City Clerk, are there any submittals?
No, we have no submittals at this time and no raised hands.
And I see no raised hands, so I will close that public comment and return for discussion. I'll turn it over to Member Bowders, who is the liaison to this committee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Bill, for being here today. And I've always said this is my favorite committee, small but mighty. Budget Advisory Committee does the often thankless and inglorious work of reviewing the city's budget, which to me has always been a statement of values. Budgets are complicated things. When we do polling for ballot measures historically, I always flip to the part of the page where we've asked between 20 and 30 questions about how the city is doing. And inevitably, always when asked, is the city managing its budget correctly? Somewhere between 32 and 40% of Emeryville residents say, have no idea, I don't know. And so that is not unusual. That is a common thing across all public agencies. People don't know what's in the budget, but it's the single most important thing. It determines where your money goes for services. It determines what programs you have. It determines whether or not you can issue bonds or accrue debt and fund things for your future and build projects. So budget oversight is not sexy, but it is extremely important. And I just want to personally thank Maru. I want to thank Bill. I want to thank Fran, and I want to thank Dylan, who are the current 4 members of that committee, as well as Brad Farmer, Christine Daniel, and Peggy Sue for their work that they do in this. And the proposal they had was short and sweet, unlike most of our meetings, which are long and dry. So that's it, Madam Mayor, but I appreciate everybody for coming out tonight and putting that presentation together.
Thank you. And I would venture to guess that all of my colleagues agree with everything that you've said in terms of our appreciation for the very hard work of this committee. And if there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion to accept this report and a second.
Madam Mayor, may I make
Yes.
one more comment?
Absolutely.
I should give special thanks to Brad Farmer, who's just coming aboard, running as fast as he can to catch up with all of our ways of doing business. And he's doing a very good job. I appreciate that very much. Also, I'd like to say thank you to a past member of the committee who is no longer with us, Bené Curtis Bauer. She was with us for a very long time. She brought small business perspective to the work of the committee, and she was particularly astute at assessing how the bond markets and the stock market were doing. Those were 2 areas of her special expertise, and we miss her. And finally, we do need, you folks out there, use your networks. We do need a representative of bigger businesses in Emeryville on the committee. Thanks for letting me interrupt one more time.
No problem. And if there's, council, please feel free to interrupt if I'm cutting you off as well. But if there is no more discussion, we'll go ahead and take that move. We'll move that item and have a second. I will entertain a motion in a second.
I'll make a motion to accept the report from the Budget Advisory Committee.
And I'll second.
Great. So we have a motion from Member Bowders and a second from Vice Mayor Donahue. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Bowders?
Just to clarify the record, Madam Mayor, I think that was Member Pats who said that, but I just want to be clarified.
I apologize. Member Pats was the second.
Councilmember Bowders?
Aye, ventriloquism lives.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Pats?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Donahue?
Aye.
And Mayor Martinez.
Aye. I was looking at Scott and he was muted and his mouth was he was unmuted. His mouth was slightly open. So good job, Christian. So that will take us to our next report of the evening. And this one is for the Commission on Aging. So I'm just waiting for staff to come in because I know I'm sure Pedro will want to introduce our committee member who is giving our presentation.
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you, Pedro.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I'd just like to introduce our tonight. Our chair could not make it. He had a class to teach. So we have our vice chair, Steve Shane, who will be doing the presentation. So I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you, Pedro, and thank you, Mayor Martinez and council members. I'm Steve Shane, Vice Chair of the Commission on Aging. I'm relatively new to the commission, but as Pedro said, I'm here to represent us because our very able chair, Baruch Golden, had a long scheduled prior commitment. You can go to the next slide. Regarding our activities in 2020, our commission has devoted significant time to the Age-Friendly Cities Initiative, including interaction with city departments addressing the 6 domains identified by the commission. Like so many activities, work on this initiative was impacted by the pandemic. Nevertheless, we have made progress thanks to presentations to the commission by the Housing and Community Development Committees. After careful review of alternatives, the commission made a recommendation to council to approve the new housing project at 4300 San Pablo Avenue. And to honor the late city council member Nora Davis, the commission recommended to council an annual cleanup day to be named for Nora, as well as the placement of a plaque on the greenway near the Piloto Park. And the commission continued to recommend support for the paratransit program plan. For the commission's priorities you can go to the next slide, please. Our priorities for 2021 include continuing our collaboration with other city departments on the planning phase of the Age-Friendly Initiative to produce a finalized Emeryville Age-Friendly City Action Plan. This includes continuing to receive updates and provide recommendations on aspects of the age-friendly city domains that impact Emeryville seniors. And we are making efforts to encourage and promote membership in the Commission on Aging that reflects the community's full range of diversity. And I'll just comment that we've lost a couple members recently. They're alive, they're just not on the committee anymore. And we really are very focused on encouraging a more diverse membership. In summary, the Commission will continue to fulfill its responsibilities. I think you can go to the next slide. That's the one. Oh.
That's the last one.
I guess this is the third one. It's the last one. Anyway, we're going to continue to fulfill our responsibilities to provide input and recommendation regarding city policies and priorities related to the aging population, such as housing, safety, and accessibility. And on behalf of the Commission on Aging, I thank the mayor and the city council.
Thank you, Stephen. And I'll just check in with my colleagues and see if there are any clarifying questions on the work of the commission or on the priorities. And seeing none, I will check in with our city clerk to see if anyone has submitted electronic public comment or if there are any hands raised. And to remind the public, you may use the raise hand feature on Zoom, or if you're attending on the phone, please press *9 to raise your hand and you will be recognized. Madam City Clerk, has anyone submitted a comment?
There's nothing at this time.
All right, I will close public comment and I will open discussion just by saying that as Mr. Shane noted, we have had some turnover on this committee, and we actually have a very active group that I think is really taking the reins on the AARP network of age-friendly communities, and they are the right group to move forward with the part of the work that is producing the action plan. So I look forward to seeing what they come back with and bring back to City Council. And I just want to see if there's any other discussion from my colleagues regarding this report before I make a motion. Seeing none, I will go ahead and move that we accept this report from the Commission on Aging and thank all of the members of the Commission on Aging and thank Kim Burrows, the staff on this, and Pedro Jimenez for all of the support that they provide to the Commission. And
I second that.
Second.
I will say that the motion was made by me and the second was made by Vice Mayor Donahue, and I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Bouders?
Aye.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Pats?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Donahue?
Aye.
And Mayor Martinez.
Aye. Thank you so much, Steve, and see you in the commission.
Thank you, Mayor.
That will bring us to our next report. This is the Economic Development Advisory Committee's annual report on goals and priorities. And Looks like Chad is here to introduce the report.
I am. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. This is Chad Smalley. I'm the Economic Development and Housing Manager, and this year's report will be given by this year's Chair, Mary Lou Thierkoff of the Economic Development Advisory Committee.
And
I'm not showing up.
I can hear you.
Oh, you hear me? Okay, well, I'll just talk.
one moment, I'm
evening.
sharing the screen. One moment, please.
Oh, okay.
Trying to find. Sorry about that. It got hidden.
There we go.
Okay.
Here we go. Go ahead, please.
Good evening, and I'm here to represent the Economic Development Advisory Committee, better known as the EDAC. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk tonight a little bit about EDAC's role, our accomplishments for 2020, and our priorities for 2021. Next. The EDAC's role is to provide input and recommendations regarding policies and priorities that relate to the city's economic development activities and strategies. Next. Our economic development strategy is to enhance Emeryville's economic status by leveraging the city's competitive advantage as the city of art and innovation. Next. Okay, so a summary of our accomplishments for 2020. Our first priority was to continue our business networking events called BizNexus events. And due to the pandemic, of course, and the public health orders, we could not gather and we could not host these events. So in lieu of hosting the events, the EDAC provided input to the city's response to the pandemic, ideas and recommendations also. Our second priority for 2020 was to review the business incentives programs, reviewed the program and recommended new incentives and modified existing ones. The funds for the facade improvement program were reallocated to help the businesses that were affected by the civil unrest of May 30th. And to provide matching funds for Alameda County's CARES program for small business grants. And other priorities for 2020 included the production of marketing tools, the implementation of paid parking, the continued implementation of the Art Center project, the continued production of affordable housing, and to continue monitoring the city's labor standards. Next. So here are some of the details. We meet bi-monthly. So in January, we reviewed the city's proposed changes to eliminate parking minimums. We reviewed the business incentives framework that would guide us through 2020 and reviewed our annual report to the City Council. Going into March, our meeting was canceled. City Hall was closed and there were no more in-person gatherings. And this is when the EDAC had to reprioritize its activities. In May, we received information about the business assistance programs that were available, some through the City of Emeryville, some through the Alameda County. And we also received information on state and federal relief programs. These were very helpful because all of us got to share them with our own networks. We were also informed about the city's eviction moratoria and the city's efforts to facilitate curbside pickup. So we established a Who's Open restaurant list on the city's website to further help restaurants during this struggle. The EDAC reviewed the business license and fire inspection rebate program and expansion of rebates to include cabaret and sidewalk sign permits. We provided input also on the restaurant rent repayment ordinance. So in July, the EDAC received an update on all the business assistance programs with all the details about how to apply for them. and included the establishment of the Local Business Recovery Grant Program, which was for those affected by the May 30 civil unrest. Now, at this meeting, we also discussed the third-party app-based food delivery platform fees. And in September, in September, the EDAC revisited the third-party app-based platform fees and recommended to City Council to adopt an ordinance limiting these fees that were charged to restaurants. We also reviewed an update on the Art Center project at that meeting and learned about the virtual activities planned for celebration of the arts. I guess the silver lining there was for Sharon that she didn't have to worry about finding a location for the event in 2020, but at the same time, she had to put the event online, and I heard she got some really good help. So in November of 2020, we reviewed our economic development annual report to City Council, which I'm presenting now. We reviewed also a survey tool to inform future format and content of BizNexus events, as well as to assess current business needs. We discussed possible virtual platforms for networking events. We received an update on business assistance programs and changes to the planning regulations related to temporary use permits for related outdoor business activities. That was 2020 in a nutshell. Next. Our economic development strategy includes a broad list of activities that are under our purview. The strategy is prioritized to guide staff, the EDAC, and City Council on where to allocate funds. Our priorities for 2021 reflect the current economic context and the need for recovery. Our first priority is business incentive programs. The city's economy has been disrupted and our attention must turn to business recovery. The city's business incentive programs can help with this recovery by addressing the financial and regulatory barriers to running a business, to establishing a new business, and reuse of buildings, among other things. Our second priority is to continue the business networking events through 2021. And we look forward to our business survey analysis, which will inform the direction, content, and development of a virtual format for future meetings until we could gather once again together and toast the evening. Our other priorities include marketing in support of business recovery efforts, continued implementation of the Art Center project, an increased focus on affordable housing, and continuing to monitor the city's labor standards. Next. So despite extraordinary difficulties and unprecedented events, the EDAC remained very busy, engaged, and productive in 2020. In 2021, the EDAC will continue to use our economic development strategy to guide our efforts to support business recovery. And I have to say that Chad was superb in supplying information about business relief programs to all of us that we shared throughout the months during this last year. And our committee was so perfect for helping us make decisions about where we needed to focus our attention. We had input from the hotel business, restaurants, food businesses, and then lots of us had one-to-one outreach to other businesses and brought that information to the group. So I felt really good about the way we approached making our decisions, and we really appreciated having Vice Mayor Donahue on our committee this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mary Lou. I'll turn it over to my colleagues to see if there are any questions on the work of your committee or on the priorities. And seeing none, I will check in with the city clerk to see if anyone has submitted electronic comment or if any hands are raised. And you can do so by using the raise hand function on Zoom, or if you're calling in, please press star 9. Madam City Clerk, are there any submittals?
Not at this time.
Thank you. I will close public comment and turn it over to Vice Mayor Donahue for any comments on the work of the EDAC and their priorities for the next year.
This committee really is looking at aspects of our city that affect our future for income and what our city could look like after the pandemic is over. And potentially this committee could recommend certain changes in how we allocate certain funds or orient ourselves towards the future. So it's a future-looking committee.
Great. Well, thank you for your service on that committee, Vice Mayor Donahue, and thank you to all of the members of that committee. You faced very concrete challenges this year, and just like all of our businesses in the city, you did a superb job of pivoting towards the need of supporting our community. Is there any more discussion from my colleagues? And if not, I will entertain a motion and a second to accept this report.
I move acceptance.
Second the motion.
We have a motion from Vice Mayor Donahue and a second from Member Bowders. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Pats.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Donahue.
Aye.
And Mayor Martinez.
Aye, and thank you again, Mary Lou, for the presentation. Thank you, Chad, for your contribution. And it is 7:16, and I am going to adjourn this special meeting. And I will wait for Sherry to let me know when she's ready for me to start the next one.
Okay, we're all set.
All right, and for everyone at home, there's going to be a quick, probably 1-minute meeting before we get to the main event of the regular city council meeting. It is now 7:17 p.m. and I am calling to order the successor agency regular meeting of the city of Emeryville. It is still March 2nd, 2021, and please bear with me as I read my introductory remarks. I'd like to state for the record that this meeting is being conducted by teleconference pursuant to the Brown Act waivers provided for under the governor's executive order in response to the COVID-19 state of emergency. During the public health emergency, City Hall is closed to the public. The agenda states that the public may view the meeting that is being live streamed online and on ETV channel 27 and provide comment by submitting an online comment form, which will then be read into the record by staff. The comment form can be accessed by going to our main City of Emeryville website at emeryville.org and clicking on Council Agendas and Videos. Once there, you will see a link entitled Submit an Online Speaker Card. The public also has the option of participating in tonight's meeting via Zoom and may provide public comment during the meeting using the Raise Your Hand feature visible on your screen, or if you're calling in, press star 9 to be recognized. The Zoom call-in information was provided on the posted agenda as well as e-notification and on social media. At this time, I will ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders.
Here.
Councilmember Medina.
Here.
Councilmember Pats.
Here.
And Vice Mayor Donahue.
Here.
And Mayor Martinez.
And I am here. And now I will look for a motion for approval of the final agenda.
I'll move the final agenda.
Second.
I have a motion by Member Bowders and a second by Member Pats. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Pats.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Donahue.
Aye.
And Mayor Martinez.
Aye. And I will look to my colleagues to see if there are any ex parte communications for this meeting. Seeing none, and now is the time for public comment. Anyone who wishes to make comments related to the items not on the agenda or on the consent agenda should have submitted your online speaker card by now. 3 minutes will be allowed for the city clerk to read your comments into the record. If you're participating in tonight's meeting via Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature visible on your screen, or if you're calling in, press *9. At this time, I will ask the city clerk whether any comments have been received via the online comment card or whether anyone has raised their hands to make audio comments.
I have nothing at this time.
And I see no raised hands either. So seeing no additional comments, I will close public comment and I will entertain a motion on the consent calendar.
So moved.
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion by Member Pats and a second by Member Bowders. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders?
Aye.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Pats?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Donahue?
Aye.
And Mayor Martinez.
Aye. And there are no action items tonight, so it is 7:20 and I will call this meeting adjourned. And when Madam City Clerk is ready, we will move over to the regular meeting.
Okay, we're all set.
Okay, thank you. It is 7:21 by my clock. I'm calling to order the City Council regular meeting of the City of Emeryville. It is still March 2nd, 2021. And Madam City Clerk, do we need to call roll again?
No, we're good on that, and also on your announcements.
Very good. Thank you so much. And at this time, I will look for a motion to approve the final agenda, or if there are any changes, please bring them up now.
I move approval.
And I will second. So motion by Vice Mayor Donahue, a second by myself. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders?
Aye.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Pats?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Donahue?
Aye.
And Mayor Martinez.
Aye. There are no special orders of the day. I will check with the city clerk to see if there are any announcements of commission and committee vacancies.
There are, as I've announced the last couple of meetings, we currently have a recruitment open to fill unexpected vacancies. Right now, we have an opening for ACTC Paratransit Advisory and Planning Commission, 1 resident. We have an opening, as Mr. Reuters mentioned, for a business representative for the Budget Advisory Committee. And for the Commission on Aging, we actually have 3 openings right now. And then for Planning Commission, we have 2. Applications are due Monday, March 15th, and the appointments will be made immediately following that at the very next City Council meeting. I might add that I had our Deputy City Clerk check on our submissions, and we don't have a lot of submissions yet. So let's really pound the drums, everybody within the sound of my voice. If you've ever felt like you want to participate in your local government, please apply for one of these positions. Thank you.
And Sherry, I wanted to check with you. Is that just for Planning Commission or is it for all of these openings?
You mean the numbers of applications submitted?
Yeah. Yeah.
I will say that for all of the openings, we currently only have 2 applications.
Okay. And then I wanted to check in with the city manager to see if it might be appropriate. I know that we do some online classes with the senior center with pretty regular attendance. So for at least for the Commission on Aging, if we might ask our teachers to make a very brief announcement at the beginning of those classes. We already know that these people are engaged with the city and they know how to use Zoom. So if they would like to have further engagement with our senior community and some say in the work that they are doing, I think that might be a good avenue for those announcements. I don't know if it would be appropriate for the other committees that are missing members.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll work with the city clerk on that. It's a great idea.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that. And while you're unmuted, Christine, do we have a city manager's report this evening?
2 things. One, which you know already, but just for the public, we did commence our paid parking program formally on February 22nd. So just want to acknowledge all of the work, particularly of Amber Evans, who's just done an enormously heavy lift on this, and our 2 new staff in the police department, our parking enforcement staff. And the second, I suspect one of you on the council will also be acknowledging the passing of our Public Art Committee member, Alicia Raffel. We're sad to announce that, but very appreciative for everything she did for the community. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Christine. And I apologize to everyone that I took you out of order. I skipped over council member special announcements and reports on meetings attended. And I would like to second my condolences to the friends and family of Alicia Raffel. But are there any special announcements or reports on meetings attended from my colleagues? Mr. Bowders.
Thank you. I have one announcement. So the Alameda County Healthy Homes Department, for which I am the representative from the city of Emeryville, has our monthly meeting. And for those in the public who are unfamiliar, the Healthy Homes Department is primarily focused on lead abatement issues and removing solid toxics from household environments. We also deal with a handful of other unusual spaces, I would say, where toxic metals heavy toxic metals is what we refer to them as, are present and pose a threat to communities. And a really alarming one came about, which I'm going to share the data with the city staff. But there are 3 organic baby foods that have toxic levels of heavy metals in them. And the Trump administration last year received a report about this and chose not to pursue or investigate the matter. And so the Biden administration picked this up. And in fact, 3 of the companies subject to this investigation have actually told the Biden administration they will not cooperate with the investigation. And so we're not able as an agency without the approval of the California Department of Public Health to issue a formal warning right now to parents in Alameda County. But I can simply say, as one member of the board who received the full report and participated in a 2-hour Q&A about what's going on with these products, I just want to share for those who are interested that there will be independent testing done of 3 types of organic baby foods that are produced by Sprouts Organic, Plum Organics, and Parents' Choice Organics. And so if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer those questions if you're a member of the community, and to share that federal investigative report and the summary documents that follow it with it. And we are actively working with the California Department of Public Health, and we will be probably issuing a statement in the next 30 days. I'll take any questions if there are any.
No, thank you, Member Bowders. We look forward to, or not look forward to, but we'll look anxiously to await reading that report. Appreciate that. I just wanted to appreciate EPD for the virtual ride-along that they presented on Instagram on Sunday. I believe Chief Jennings is an attendee. So I just wanted to give my thanks to, I believe it was Officer Wharton. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing her name, but it was very informative, and I appreciate that type of outreach and really just showing folks the job that you do and how busy it is even on a Sunday. So that will move us along to ex parte communications. I'll look to my colleagues to see if there's anything to report on tonight's meeting. Member Bowders.
I have a couple items, Madam Mayor. On item 12.2, I had a meeting with the Alameda County Building Trades. On item 12.4, I have met on multiple occasions with our lobbyists from Townsend Public Affairs. And on item 13.1C, I will be recusing myself this evening due to having a conflict with that project.
Okay, thank you. We didn't receive a comment from the building trades on that item, did we, colleagues? Okay, thank you. Member Medina?
I do believe we all received a comment letter from the Pool and Hot Tub Association on item 12.22, a riveting read.
Thank you for reminding me. Appreciate that. Yes, we all did. Thank you. Okay, seeing no other ex parte communications, now I'll open it up the meeting for the public comment portion. Now is the time for the public comment portion of the meeting. Anyone wishing to make comments related to items not on the agenda or on the consent agenda should have submitted your online speaker card by now. 3 minutes will be allowed for the city clerk to read your comments into the record. If you're participating in tonight's meeting via Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature visible on your screen, or if you're calling in, press *9. At this time, I'll check in with the city clerk to see if any electronic submittals have been received or whether anyone has raised their hands to make those comments.
I don't see that we have any submissions at this time.
Okay, seeing no additional electronic submittals, I am going to close public comment. And that brings us to the consent agenda. Colleagues, do you have anything that you wish to discuss or pull? If not, I will entertain a motion on the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Member Pat, seconded by Member Bedina. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bouders?
Aye.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Pats?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Donahue?
Aye.
And Mayor Martinez.
Aye. And that brings us to item 11.1. This is a public hearing. It's the resolution of the City Council of the City of Emeryville amending the City of Emeryville master fee schedule for fiscal year 2020 to 2021 regarding dockless shared mobility systems. And I see both Mary Grace and Nancy have joined us, and I'll turn it over to staff for a presentation.
I'm sorry. This is on the master fee schedule?
Yes, this is the dockless shared mobility master fee schedule amendment. Nancy, do you have a brief overview of the proposed changes?
Well, I apologize. I hadn't prepared anything, but yes, the proposed changes are to change the permit application fee. The permit application fee was set at $2,500, but based on staff time required, and we still think that's valid. But for subsequent years, for renewals in subsequent years, it won't take us much staff time to renew a permit we've already issued. So I'm proposing to reduce that cost to $1,000. And we set the actual permit issuance fee originally at $15,000. And at the time that we did that, the state of play of dockless shared mobility was a lot more chaotic than it is now. And there were more players, and we estimated a certain number of staff hours that got us to that amount. And at that time, our neighboring cities had higher amounts for the permit issuance. So now with the calmer, more regulated market or self-regulated market, we believe that is excessive now in the current circumstances, and are proposing to reduce the permit fee to $5,000 for each year.
Great, thank you, Nancy. And I think the staff report was very clear on this, so appreciate your presentation. And I'll just look to my colleagues to see if there are any clarifying questions before I open the public hearing. And seeing none, the time is 7:33 p.m. I'll open the public hearing, and I will check with the city clerk to see if any advance electronic submittals have been sent her way.
No, I haven't received any.
And I will check with the city clerk to see if any hands are raised. And to remind folks watching at home, if you're joining by Zoom, you can use the raise hand feature, or you can press *9 to be recognized. And we'll just give this a few seconds to see if anyone decides that they want to speak right now. And seeing no public wishing to speak on this item, it is still 7:33, and I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to my colleagues for discussion. Does anyone have any issues with the proposed resolution? It made a whole lot of sense to me. So if nobody has any issues, do I have a motion and a second?
I'll move the resolution. Seems totally reasonable.
I'll second it.
I will take the motion by Member Medina and the second by Member Bowders. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Pats.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Donahue.
Aye.
And Mayor Martinez.
Aye, passes unanimously, which brings us to action items. We have 12.1. This is consideration of Budget Advisory Committee recommendation of additional requirements for Budget Advisory Committee membership. We'll turn this over to Brad for presentation.
Good evening again, Mayor and council members. The recommendation was to ask for additional requirements for the Budget Advisory Committee. And Bill Roeder is also here once again to elaborate on that a little bit. Bill, if you would, please.
I'm here and unmuted.
We can hear you, Bill.
I won't go into any elaborate explanation. Basically, it seemed to me that the committee, in particular, Member Quattel, were interested in making sure that people who serve on the committee have some reasonable understanding, have been in town in a sense, and paying attention to the business operations before they serve on the committee. That's fundamentally what we're recommending. We also understand that flexibility is available for you folks in looking at candidates. And of course, we deeply appreciate folks who are willing to volunteer and serve. And we desperately need folks to step up and serve on this particular committee.
Thank you, Bill. I think it's clear what the committee is asking for, but that's to me. I will check with my colleagues to see if they'd like any clarification on these recommendations. And seeing none, I would like to open this up to the public, and I'll ask the city clerk if anyone has submitted public comment or if anyone is raising their hand. You would do that by using the raise hand feature within Zoom, or if you're calling in, please press *9. Madam City Clerk, has anyone turned in any comments on this?
Not at this time, and I see no raised hands.
Thank you. I will close public comment, and I'd like to begin with Member Bowders, who is our liaison to this committee, for thoughts.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Bill, for being here. I had a chance to listen to the committee. These are their recommendations. I've done a little bit of homework, and I'm going to ask if the city clerk would just help me through a quick Q&A based on the 4 items in this report, because I believe it would be really valuable for the community to hear the great work that the city clerk's office does on some of these items that were raised as opportunities. And I would have a recommendation based on what I heard and what I know to the rest of council. So Sherry, you or Lorraine, if you could just help me with just a couple of questions. First, there was a recommendation here. Number 2 on the list was to require that people provide a resume, a LinkedIn URL, something like that. The clerk's office has the capacity to receive a resume when somebody submits their application. Is that correct?
That's correct, and we would just include that with their information that we post with the posted agenda for your packet.
Okay, and then the next recommendation they had was to give applicants information about the committee, what the committee's background is, what kind of work they'll be doing, what the times of year it meets, et cetera. When we put the listings out for committee vacancies like you frequently do and you talked about at the beginning of the evening, the committees that are out there, do we provide on that posting like a link to the committee landing page on the city website where all that information is already contained?
With your indulgence, I'd like to bring our deputy who handles this, Lorraine Leong, and put her on the spot and allow her to answer that question. She's a little more familiar with
That's okay.
What we're
Hey,
doing
Lorraine.
and or what we could do.
Hello.
Hi, Lorraine.
Yes, we do put the link on the...
We can barely hear you.
Can you speak up, Lorraine? We can't hear you.
Now we lost her altogether.
Lorraine, are you there?
Sorry.
Oh, there you are.
Is it better?
Yes, now it's better.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, we do provide the link. Notice that gets sent
Well, I think we're losing her again. I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, we do. I heard that much.
So that was my understanding, and on that landing page, it does have the frequency and meeting schedule for the committees, and it does provide an overview of what the committee does. So I just wanted to capture that because I know there was some discussion about making sure people were vested in kind of the background of this. And then the last thing it says that we welcome applicants and then we thank them for having submitted their application. Do we do two questions? Do we send a confirmation receipt to people when they've submit their application?
We do, and then we follow up immediately after appointments are made, and we congratulate the successful candidates, and we thank the other applicants for their participation. And not only that, but we keep their applications active on file for 1 year, and when other unexpected vacancies occur, we assertively contact them to see if they're still interested in that or in different appointments. So we have a lot of follow-up that way.
Great. So, Madam Mayor, I'm obviously interested in hearing what my colleagues' thoughts are on this, and I want to appreciate Bill for being available. But my recommendation to the council is these were the 4 recommendations from the committee. They weren't in print for us at the time we met as an advisory committee, so I didn't have the ability to ask or poll the city clerk's office in advance of our meeting where they might have been able to be available to, share some of that knowledge at the time. So I appreciate the Budget Advisory Committee for making these recommendations, but upon review, we do numbers 2, 3, and 4 of the list. I think that maybe we could ask Lorraine and Sherry to simply adjust the application that says if you would like to attach a resume, you could, because I believe it doesn't, Sherry, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it doesn't voluntarily offer them that chance. So we could simply just modify it to say if you'd like to attach a resume, you may do so.
Yes.
But yes, thank you. That would be great. And then I would say the only other thing is that the requirement that applicants have lived or worked in Emeryville for 1 year, I don't support that recommendation. That's the only one I didn't support. And the reason being is that this is a committee that has a vacancy. It's a very small committee, as I mentioned during Bill Reuter's really excellent kind of summary presentation of the work. It takes a very refined set of skills to really understand all the elements of the budget. And while we're not looking for somebody to necessarily be a budget expert, there aren't a lot of people who raise their hand for this because it's kind of a mysterious, murky thing to some folks. And if we had somebody move into the city who was a finance director at a nonprofit or a business, or if we had somebody come into the community who has prior municipal bonding or funding experience, I wouldn't want to turn them down or away on a kind of arbitrary basis that they hadn't lived here for a certain number of days. So I just want to say that I think that this was a great set of recommendations, and I appreciated the discussion. And my recommendation would simply be to give an update back to the Budget Advisory Committee of what we're doing that is in line with what their asks are, and to update the application to say if you'd like to submit or attach a resume, you may do so, but that would be my only recommendation out of this.
Madam Mayor, that's a very good summary. John, I appreciate it very much. And I think that's a reasonable thing. Send it back to us, let us think about it. And I'm glad you had time to check out with staff and see what in fact is already being done.
Thank you, Bill. I'll look back to my colleagues see if there's support for Member Bowder's recommendation. Member Medina.
I support Member Bowder's recommendation. I think that's extremely reasonable, and I commend our city clerk's office for, as always, doing excellent work with all the applicants for these committees.
Right.
Are there Member Pats?
Just gonna say I agree.
Member Donahue, did you want to speak up?
I would say that I appreciate what Councilmember Bowder said about getting someone who has experience if they've just come to town, and seeing as we have an open position, I go along with that idea.
Right.
And I agree. I also support Member Bowder's recommendations, although I really appreciate the spirit of the recommendations made by this hardworking committee. So thank you, Member Bowders, for serving as liaison and for making these recommendations. I believe staff has our direction on this item.
Right. Good.
Okay.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. So that'll move us to item 12.2. And this is consideration of energy and building REACH codes. And we should have, I see Mary Grace Houlihan joining us, and I believe Nancy's going to join us as well. And I will turn it over to staff for the presentation on this item.
Okay, thank you. Hi, this is Nancy Humphrey, Environmental Program Supervisor in Public Works. And I didn't greet you last time, so good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. I want to add before I get going that we do have also on the call, we have Farhad Farahmand from TRC available if we have technical questions on the energy part. Farhad works for TRC and they're under contract to East Bay Community Energy to help municipalities, jurisdictions work out the details of proposed REACH codes. So he has been very, very helpful in the technical details and is available if questions come up. So we're here to talk about adopting REACH codes to reduce Emeryville's climate impact and doing that in the building sector. And I say here decarbonizing buildings, and I want to say that I'll use the terms carbon, greenhouse gas, GHG more or less interchangeably. Functionally, that's since all greenhouse gases are normalized to carbon for counting purposes, we all just use the terms interchangeably. They mean the same thing in this case. Sherry, next. So I'm proposing REACH codes, and as you probably recall, REACH codes are amendments to local amendments to building code that reaches beyond the state minimum requirements. And it's an opportunity for local governments to act on clean air, climate solutions, renewable energy economy. And it is required that there are findings, geological, climatic, and topological findings that show that these codes are necessary to for those reasons. And we have findings that we will submit as part of a proposal if we make a proposal. REACH codes can be prescriptive or they can be performance-based, and we have a mix of those. And they must be cost-effective, and they must not cause more energy to be used, right? They must be at least as efficient as state code. All right, next, please. All right, so why are we looking at this? And the big picture is we're looking at this because of climate change. This chart over here shows at the bottom of the pipette there, that's the average Earth temperature in pre-industrial times. We have already raised the Earth's average temperature by 1.1 degrees Celsius, and it's having impact on ocean temperature and severe weather and ice cap melting, and it is exponentially, it gets worse with more and more warming. And these greenhouse gases are the major contributor to this warming trend. So fossil fuels being the lion's share of our problem with greenhouse gases, we're looking at everything with fossil fuels and everything that emits greenhouse gases and looking for opportunities to slow this trend. All right, next. All right, so don't get too scared off by this chart. What this is just to show that these kinds of REACH codes are really a regional norm right now. This chart shows what in the green row, what is being proposed, what staff is proposing for Emeryville REACH codes. And then many of our neighboring jurisdictions are listed, and it shows which of those jurisdictions have already adopted. The blue is fuel type, the pink is occupancy type. So it's just to show you that this is the norm, and builders and developers are working with this already in many of our neighboring cities. So, and the energy code language we're proposing is based largely on Hayward's ordinance, which has been in place for a year. Next, please, Sherry. Okay, so Emeryville's community emissions are shown here, shown from 2005 going down to 2018, which is the latest year for which we have good data. And they're expressed in metric tons of CO2 equivalent. So that's what I'm saying, you know, no matter what the gas is, it's normalized to a carbon measure. So as you can see, it's going down, which is good. The brown stripe on the very bottom is waste, the emissions associated with waste, and we're working on that. The next one, the green, is from transportation. And again, you know, staff have heard council's direction and are working on strategies to reduce that. Then the next two, the gray one is electricity, and the blue on the top is natural gas related emissions. So you can see that the electricity related emissions are shrinking, they're going down, and that's because the grid is getting cleaner. There's more renewable energy on the grid, and East Bay Community Energy offers 100% greenhouse gas free electricity. And over time, the grid is going to move in that direction overall. So electricity is going to be GHG free eventually, and it's certainly malleable. We can make improvements. But you can see on the top, the blue boxes, the natural gas related emissions are not changing. And that's because you cannot get the greenhouse gases out of a greenhouse gas. It's methane. So in order to make progress, we're advising that we address this natural gas problem. And I'll just tell you that red line, that's our 2030 goal of 40% reduction from our baseline. And the yellow line is our 2050 goal of 80%. And you can see the natural gas would overtake that just by itself. So yeah, it's an area of opportunity. Next, please, Sherry. So in the building sector, you can see the lion's share of the operational emissions from building. So operating a building, most of them, 3/4 of them, are from natural gas. 18% and shrinking is, and 6% and shrinking is from waste. So this is not data that's hard to tease out. This is an opportunity for us. And I say that the natural gas, so when I show you this, that at 76% is attributable to the natural gas that is actually used in the building. It's combusted. But next, please, Sherry. The whole gas infrastructure, the natural gas process, includes a lot of leakage. Maybe 6% of the gas that is extracted leaks between and getting to its end point. And that's important because uncombusted natural gas is significantly more impactful from greenhouse gas perspective than combusted natural gas. So we're not even counting that. Not to mention indoor air quality, outdoor air quality, the risks of the extraction or fracking processes that include groundwater contamination, earthquakes, and then the public safety concerns about aging gas delivery infrastructure. So it's as I say, a big opportunity. All right, next please, Sherry. So one of the angles we're taking with these proposals is first to look at new construction. This would be new construction coming down the pipe. the proposal would be for residential occupancies, all electric construction, no gas infrastructure, no new gas infrastructure. And then next, please, Sherry. For all other occupancy types, any non-residential occupancy types, we'd offer two pathways. Someone doing the building could choose to do all electric construction at current code, or if they feel that they want or need mixed fuel, they can build with mixed fuel, with increased efficiency, and with electrification readiness. And electrification readiness really boils down to sizing the panel, the electric panel, for future needs. Like you'll have a gas stove, say, and you need to have the panel capacity for that stove to be switched to electric. And you need either conduit or wiring. So service, but you do need to build in some readiness for electrification. All right, next, please, Sherry. And then regardless of occupancy type, the proposal would be to require solar panels to be installed on the entirety of a building's solar zone. And the solar zone is something that is defined in current code, basically as any space you have that is not used for something else. You don't have your HVAC or some other equipment up there. It's not shaded. It's suitable. So you already, under current code, have to identify what that zone is. This requirement would say, okay, you already know what the zone is. You got to put solar up there. And there are a number of reasons why this is proposed, but one is that it helps greatly with cost effectiveness in some scenarios. Next, please. Okay, cost effectiveness. So I have to thank Farhad for working with me on this chart, and I will walk you through it. What this is, as you can see on the y-axis, it's cost per square foot of floor area, and that cost is calculated for the whole lifetime of a building, a 30-year span. So, and the green is construction costs, capital costs, and the blue is operating costs. So for all cases, it is cheaper to build all electric than it is to build mixed fuel. The solid line, the darkest line, is the cost of building and operating a mixed fuel building of that type. And the only one, medium office is tiny bit more costly to operate this way. But in all cases, and I'll use the single family as an example, it is more expensive to operate, but the costs are more than offset by the savings in initial capital costs. So let's say you're building a 2,000 square foot single family home we'll round this up to $1. So this is $1 per square foot over 30 years. So that's $2,000 of additional operating costs over 30 years. Not each year, total over 30 years. And that is balanced by the fact that you saved almost $8,000 on your construction. So this one has been a challenge. So I wanted to stop and just check in and see if you have questions about this.
Colleagues, feel free to pipe up if you have a question on this slide. Otherwise, we can move on.
Madam Mayor, I have a ton of questions, but I would like to just wait till the presentation.
Yeah, why don't you save them? Because if council will indulge me, I'd like to check in with the public first when the presentation is over. So please hold your questions.
Okay, all right.
Just was going to open it up for that particular slide. So Sherry, if you want to go ahead and share that PowerPoint again, and Nancy, feel free to continue.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So we were on slide 12.
Is that the right one?
Well, yeah, then the next one.
Yep.
So all of what I was talking about up till now was new construction. We do have two proposals for existing buildings. One is if you are replacing, for your own reasons, replacing or altering your electrical panel, we are proposing that that be required to be sized for future electrification. And an exception there would be if you would need a higher level of service from PG&E to do that, then you would be exempt from this. This is not meant to require people to get a service level that they don't need at this time. And then if you're replacing certain heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems, we would propose requiring that that be replaced with an electric vapor condensing or heat pump system. There are exceptions here too for different sizes and types of HVAC units because of the cost effectiveness and market availability of some of the options. Okay, next please. So we're not going to do questions now, but I will tell you that we're moving on from energy to building materials. So yes, thank you. So the Sustainability Committee looked at three main areas of building material opportunity. And one is mass timber, which is an engineered wood product that can be used for framing. It will be allowable in mid-cycle. So July 2021, it'll be allowable in California for up to 18 stories. So we didn't feel the need to address it with the REACH code. It's coming in the code. Straw bale construction, there is an appendix we could have adopted and we talked about adopting, but the building department informed us that in their experience, the currently available process, which is alternative methods, means and methods, is already working and is more flexible and usable. So they recommended we stuck with the process that we have. So that leaves us with low carbon concrete, which is actually a very big opportunity. So next, please. Before I get into too much about this, I've got to address this term embodied emissions. Most of the emissions we talk about are, virtually all of the emissions we talk about are operational emissions. So they're your operating equipment, or you're heating a building, or you're driving a vehicle, or you're landfilling waste. You're doing activities that generate that those GHGs. Embodied emissions are those attributable to the materials and construction of a building or other infrastructure. So the mining, manufacturing, constructing, those GHG emissions are said to be embodied in the material and embodied in the building, because otherwise we're not counting them. They get put in when the building is constructed, and then that's it, they're there. Embodied emissions account for 11% of GHG emissions globally and 28% of building sector emissions globally. So they're not a small thing. Next, please. So this chart is about the relationship of embodied emissions and operational emissions. So it's a cumulative chart going left to right. So over time, over the 20-year period of this, 22-year period of this chart, the embodied emissions hit the project at the time it's constructed. And they're there, that's it. They're not going anywhere. They're not ongoing, and you can't do anything to alter them after the fact. So cumulatively, they just are there, and that's that. Then when you're operating the building, you have choices. You can make changes that improve the operational emissions with efficiency and zero GHG electricity and various other strategies. So you can affect the operational emissions, and we are hoping to do that, but you can't do anything about those embodied emissions. They're always going to be there, and they're not counted in GHG inventories. Next, please. So concrete alone is responsible for 8 to 10% of all greenhouse gas emissions worldwide each year. Steel is also, you know, a major contributor, but concrete is big. So in 2018, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District gave a grant to Marin County. Next, please, Sherry. Marin County did a study about low carbon concrete, reducing the carbon, the emissions, embodied emissions in concrete. And they did a study with engineering partners, and Stop Waste was involved, Carbon Leadership Forum. They had other jurisdictions involved, San Francisco, Alameda County, and over 30 building industry organizations that work in the Bay Area were all part of this study. And what they came up with was a code that Marin County has adopted that is flexible for construction needs. It has 2 pathways. You can either reduce the cement level in your concrete mix, or you can use alternatives to cement in your concrete mix that have lower emission ratings. All the other things, the ASTM standards must still be met for strength. And this proposal gives builders options. It can be, if you choose the pathway where you are reducing cement level on your project, you have the options of choosing how to do that. So if you have an element that needs a certain strength and a certain drying speed, you can still make that mix, but you can account for the savings you need in another part of the construction that maybe doesn't have those same requirements. It's as load bearing or doesn't need drying, something like that. So it's holistic in regard to the overall project. And in this, as well as for the energy ones, there have already been forms and procedures to help builders demonstrate compliance and to help building officials review for compliance. So next, please. So overall, we are proposing to make local amendments to the California Building Code. We codify the California Building Code requirements in Title 8 of Emeryville Municipal Code. So these changes would be amendments to Title 8 of Emeryville Municipal Code. Next, please. So we thought about, you know, this is a change in building. This would be, if this proposal is a change in what builders have done, business as usual. So there are some exceptions in the timing here. If this proposal moves forward, REACH codes would be effective after, I'll tell you the process in a minute, but they would apply to a project at the time of building permit issuance, with the exceptions that if a project already has a planning permit or a zoning compliance review, or doesn't require planning approval, but they have already submitted their building permit application. Those would be grandfathered in. And then any others and any ones meeting those milestones after the effective date of the ordinance would be subject to the ordinance. All right, next, please. So the steps we've taken to date include, we had a study session in the before times in November 2019. And then the Sustainability Committee has been working on this in the subsequent months. We had an outreach webinar in October 2020, to which we invited several hundred Emeryville stakeholders, builders, developers, property owners, crafts, trades, contractors. And then with the input we got there, the Sustainability Committee forwarded the recommendations that I'm describing today in these proposals. And so next, please. So the next steps would be, if council decides to move forward that's the council review we're at today. There would be ordinance development. The staff would develop ordinance. The ordinance readings would take place. And after a second reading, we would submit a packet to the California Energy Commission for their review. They review the energy proposals to make sure that you've made the findings you need. Well, the findings are for the other one. To make sure that the proposals are cost effective and energy efficient. And then after that, we submit both the energy and the building material ordinance sections to the California Building Standards Commission for filing. They don't have a review or an up or down vote. We just file with them. And then at the same time, internally, we develop our procedures and we do our outreach to the affected communities, the stakeholders, to make sure that everybody is ready to go and has their questions answered. So next, please. So now this is my last slide.
Okay, thank you. And actually, I will turn to council and see if there are any clarifying questions that might benefit the public before we go into public comment. I see Member Bowder's hands raised.
Thanks. I have a few clarifying questions for staff. First, on the Marin County model, has Marin County implemented that model?
They have not. It's codified, but they have not implemented because they are waiting for a supplier in their area to be ready to make the mixes that are required.
Okay, so is that model in effect anywhere else where we can look at how that's had an impact on housing construction?
No, it is not, except one of our pathways is the one with a reduced, our proposed pathways with the reduced or the supplemental or replacement cementitious material. That's what Berkeley has in place. So that is in effect, and Berkeley is enforcing that.
Right, but the staff report says that the Marin model is what staff recommends. So I just want to clarify that there's no other place that full model is in effect that you're aware of.
That's true. The full model is not in effect anywhere.
Okay. The next question is, I noticed on the original chart where you had all the X's in the boxes, you listed lab and research space. Are you aware of a lab or research space that has successfully implemented all electric?
I'm not aware of it. I think every case is going to be different. I can imagine that there are scenarios that would work and scenarios that would not in current development. That is why lab buildings are among the buildings that have the option of a mixed fuel construction.
Okay. Can you explain why you or staff suggest or recommend the Hayward model for modeling these reach codes? What about that led you to that choice?
Well, it's a good question. When we were working on these proposals, we were sort of looking at everything and making a stew out of them. And our building official, Vic Gonzalez, wisely said, does one of our neighbors have an example that's already in use, that builders are using, that is working and that meets what the intent that the Sustainability Committee had recommended. And Hayward really fit that bill very well. So in order to help the community of builders, have some consistency, that's how we went with Hayward.
Okay, 3 other brief questions. The follow-up to that question is, what other cities' models did you consider other than Hayward?
I'll defer to Farhad on that because I was taking a lot of lead from Farhad, who has been involved in many cities' proposals. Is Farhad off mute?
Yes, hello. Good evening, Council. This is Farhad with TRC, consultant to East Bay Community Energy. So there's several models available. There's the electric preferred, all electric, and natural gas bands. And given the type of development that Emeryville has been seeing, and some preferences from city staff, it seemed that the hybrid approach, where requiring all electric in a situation where it is much more technically feasible to do in low-rise residential, seemed preferable. Whereas, there's a variety of non-residential buildings that are developed in Emeryville, so there was more flexibility perceived to be necessary there.
Okay, my remaining two questions. One is, have you done any analysis on the intersectionality between the reach codes you've proposed and its impact on housing production?
Farhad, have you been involved in any studies?
So this is a fairly emergent topic, and that the study on that would not have historical data necessarily to be able to point to. However, there is an analogous situation where energy efficiency measures have been proposed repeatedly, since the early 2000s for the statewide energy efficiency code. And there have been a couple studies that have shown that energy efficiency improvements to new construction buildings do not have a substantial impact on, and I'm hoping I'm quoting this correctly because I'm going from my memory here, and I can follow up later with more detail. Do not have a substantial impact on the sale price of that house, for better or for worse. One is because, for better, because it doesn't actually, the market value of the building is much greater than what those incremental differences would be as a result of those measures. For worse, because an energy efficient home or an electrified home is better for the environment, better for the occupants. So, there should be some beneficial value there that's not actually reflected.
Okay, my last question then, and thank you, Madam Mayor and colleagues, goes to that last item, which is cost efficiency and effectiveness. So there was a couple small graphs in the staff report that showed, and I think there was one on the presentation that showed the net cost reduction per square foot for the production of different types of structures or housing types, I think was what was captured on the slide tonight, by the use of these efficiencies. And what I didn't see was kind of something we see like at the Air District, for example, is there'll be a cost efficiency table where there will be standard X and standard Y and standard Z. And then in the second column, it will say the cost, whether that's a fixed capital cost or an ongoing cost, and maybe there's even a fixed cost and an operational cost, the cost to install X, the cost to operate X, the cost to install Y, the cost to operate Y, et cetera. And then there will be the GHG benefits or whatever the other reduction is. If it's carbon emissions, PM, there will be something that captures what is the yearly or lifetime expectancy for reductions. Is it one-time upfront costs? Are there one-time reductions in emissions? And are there emissions reductions in the production and resourcing process as well? And then the last column is usually a combination of things like what are the net health benefits? So, and I don't expect necessarily that staff would have access to the EPA Ben mapping tool, but some of the data that's collected in those analyses will tell us things like by reducing the net reduction community-wide by the estimated number of houses built within a 10-year period under this new reach code, right? The changes that we're proposing here will lead to X reduction in tons of carbon or whatever the substance may be that we're trying to eliminate. And that will yield in the immediate vicinity, the subject area, the residents in that area will see a net reduction of 400 fewer heart attacks, 200 fewer cases of COPD. There'll be something that comes out with that using that mapping tool. And I'm just wondering if that's available to us or has been used or has been considered to be used.
Well, I'll start by saying that I know of UCLA's study on the indoor and outdoor air quality health impacts. It doesn't have all the other cells that you're looking at, but it does have monetized health impacts from natural gas use indoors and outdoors. Outdoor impact. Farhad, you have every kind of chart. Is that kind of detail available?
Yeah. So we definitely can. I believe what the council member was alluding to is kind of the base case. What is the status quo, and then what is the proposal, and what are the differences between those two, and kind of totaling those. The chart that we displayed during the presentation was an incremental difference. It sounded like a total difference may be more useful. We definitely have that information for costs upfront and operational, as well as greenhouse gas emissions. Extrapolating those to the built environment within Emeryville would require a review of the development pipeline, typical permit applications, and those kinds of things. But it is certainly could be done.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other clarifying questions before we go to public comment? And I will recognize Vice Mayor Donahue.
By development pipeline, does that mean a planned unit development from a long time ago or something different?
It means that they've got their planning approval. It's not their entitlement. It's their planning approval for their project. So something that was entitled 15 years ago or 10 years ago, but has not had planning approval for their actual plans would be covered by this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other clarifying questions? Seeing none, I would like to open this up for public comment. Those who would like to be recognized, please use the raise hand feature if you're joining us via Zoom. If you're joining us via phone, please press *9, and I will check first with the city clerk to see if she's received any electronic submittals before we start to recognize speakers.
None at this time.
Okay, I do see 3 raised hands, so I will leave it to the clerk to go ahead and unmute the speakers one at a time. You will each have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay. M. De La Peña Medina, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor Martinez and council members. My name is Mitzi De La Peña Medina, Biocom California's Bay Area Public Policy Associate. Biocom California is a trade organization representing over 1,400 life science members in the state of California. My role is to provide input on policies that could impact our Bay Area members. I am here today to request the council take additional time to understand the possible impact the proposed REACH codes will have on Emeryville's life science industry. During the October informal webinar, specifics on the proposal were unclear. We learned last week that council would be considering proposed energy and building codes that could have unintended consequences on the life science industry. With Emeryville being home to many companies in the sector, it would be prudent to solicit additional input because of the unique energy needs of these businesses. Thank you.
All right, and next I will bring up Jeffrey Sears. You can unmute and you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council people. This is Jeff Sears, a partner at Wareham Development, an active developer of life science property in your and other nearby communities for over 40 years. I want to follow up on the comments just made. First of all, we really support your effort to look at how to increase sustainability and reduce climate change as one little part of a big globe. Got to do it locally to have it add up. And hopefully there will be REACH codes that do make sense. My experience is not with residential, and I think, I heard Councilman Bowders ask a lot of important questions, but we certainly have experience with life science buildings. And we were actively involved with your neighbor Berkeley when they considered their REACH codes. The life science sector does have a lot of unique requirements, primarily because of human health and safety that require most of the spaces to exhaust their air into space, keeping you from recovering the thermal energy that you use to heat or cool that. You need to do that to keep people safe, but it means you lose a lot more thermal energy, and the buildings just use a lot of energy to keep the people safe. So we, it's complicated with our building types. I think there are ways that you could have reach codes. The details matter a lot. And as the prior speaker just said, some of those details are just coming out. We've had some initial dialogue with your Public Works Department, and Mary Grace and Nancy were very open to those things. And I think we'd like to just participate in as the details are fleshed out, because I think that those will make it work or not work. And it's important to try to make these advances in a way that doesn't cause unintended consequences. As an example, the solar was discussed, and they talk about available rooftop. Our roofs are covered with equipment, but the first day we build a building, often the roof has not got all the things that are going to go onto it. As an example, our Emory Station West building, the most recent one we've built, we covered about half the roof initially, and 2 years later, the whole roof is covered. So for that, we don't have a problem with the solar, but we'd want a definition that allowed for contemplated future additions. So there are details that will matter, but I think if you take experienced advice of people who are familiar with this, both in our sector and the residential, you'll come up with an ordinance that may make sense for you to pass. Thank you.
And next, we'll hear from Melissa Yu. You can unmute, and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, Mayor Martinez and council members. My name is Melissa Yu, and I am the conservation coordinator at the Sierra Club. And I'm here today to support the REACH code and this effort that you all are doing right now. And we support a strong electrification ordinance because it's an appropriate and timely response to mitigate climate change, the climate crisis, just as Nancy has mentioned. And by adopting this ordinance, the city of Emeryville will lead a wave of cities and counties across California in declaring that fossil fuels really have no place in our homes and in our commercial buildings or in our communities, and that we do have a right to clean, safe, and affordable energy. So, and we've witnessed with rooftop solar and with zero net energy policy that city leadership, local city leadership, is really key to raising the ambition of the state policymakers like the California Energy Commission, and that change really starts at the local level, and climate leadership is desperately needed. Nancy already went through the benefits of the ordinance, that it could improve air quality, and it will lower the cost of new construction, and it will make Emeryville homes and businesses safer and more resilient in the face of climate change. And we really hope that you all are going to pass the strongest REACH code possible. And I look forward to working with you all on outreach, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Next, we'll hear from Salil Palapi. Sorry for mispronouncing your name.
All good. Can everyone hear me okay?
A little louder, please.
Will do. Hi, good evening. My name is Salil Payapalli. Am I on audio only, or am I also on video? I can't quite tell.
Audio You're on only. Audio only, Salil.
Audio, okay, sounds good, thank you. Just wanted to say hello, Salil Payapalli, VP of Development for Biomed Realty. By way of very quick background, we provide real estate to life sciences and technology. Thanks also for welcoming Biomed into Emeryville. We couldn't be more excited to start this new chapter with our Center of Innovation. So thank you for that. On the subject of REACH codes and specifically phasing out gas in buildings, we definitely appreciate the opportunity to participate in the discussion. At the very highest level, the long-term mission of reducing our carbon footprint definitely aligns front and center with Biomed's sustainability objectives. It also aligns with some of the ESG goals that some of our major R&D clients have also set up. We were doing LEED Platinum 20 years ago before it was cool, and we're definitely engaged. So I just wanted to sort of start there. Having said that, this one's a tricky one. It's complicated, and we're actually actively working with experts in like all sorts of fields like systems design, engineering, air quality, sustainability, facilities operations, etc., across the portfolio like right now. to understand what an all-electric research facility actually looks like, and how our customers, clients, R&D companies might end up having to adjust their business model to do research in an all-electric building. So we're more than happy to share information and findings in real time, that could inform this discussion. Totally happy to do that. We're all, and this is across the portfolio. I'm not just speaking for myself here in the Bay Area, but, my counterparts across the company in Boston, Cambridge, all over the place, really, trying to figure out how to do the right thing, given the trend, given where this is going. We don't have the answer yet, I must say that. The art is in the details and in the time schedule for implementation, and we are also trying to base our strategy and execution on really good data. Given, stating the obvious here, but given this is sort of cutting edge frontier topic, we haven't found really long run good data sets in our little slice of the real estate universe. We're not office, we're not residential, we're life science and R&D, that have actually implemented proof of concept for major decision considerations, operating history and costs and downtime, redundancy, etc. And then as an entire topic itself, system risk, what is the electricity grid actually going to be able to do to reliably handle like X gigawatts of all electric building? What happens when all the Teslas show up, EV charging? What about incrementally hotter summers and AC loads, transit oriented density? There's a lot of draws and they're all playing out at the same time. So what is the interplay of all of this, and how is PG&E responding? What about unanticipated side effects? Our customers are quite anxious. They have contingency anxiety. Are they going to start, installing 100% diesel generator backup power for that day?
That's your time.
Thank you. So we support the mission. Very interested in the details of implementation. So let me pause there. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, and I'll just check with our city clerk to see if, while people were speaking, if anyone has electronically submitted any comments.
They have not.
Okay, thank you. And seeing no more raised hands, I will close public comment and bring it back to my colleagues. And I'd like to give the opportunity to my colleagues who serve on the Sustainability Committee for their comments first. Thank you so much for working on this. I know it's very dense, so I appreciate the work that you've done. So I'll recognize Member Medina first.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank the public commentators for their insightful remarks. This has been an enormous amount of stuff to go through, all the REACH codes, which is part of why I came out of a study session and to sustainability in the first place. And since that time, a lot of other cities have adopted different models of ordinances. And so I think what we wanted to do was come back here for a temperature check and get some direction on a couple of items. For me, I think it was important for us to have some conversation with the whole council about electrification, specifically because biotech is one of the largest industries in Emeryville. We are one of the larger biotech hubs in the nation. That's certainly not something we want to compromise. And we understand that biotech just has different infrastructural needs than, say, residential buildings or different kinds of like retail establishments. So I think based on the length of the presentation, the amount of questions it's generated, I'm getting the sense that this is too much information to comprehensively go over in a single meeting. I think we'd probably be here all night and probably not come to conclusions. I think what might be a good course of action, if the rest of the council is willing, is to maybe give us some feedback on electrification. I'm sorry, the cat's going crazy in the background. And then we could bring back these items one by one so we can have kind of in-depth conversations about the individual REACH code proposals that are coming out of sustainability, rather than sort of overloading the council with all of this information, because it is quite a bit. So I'm curious to hear what my colleagues think of that.
Thank you, Member Medina. I'll move to Vice Mayor Donahue.
If you look at the charts for residential, talk about a cost effectiveness of these REACH codes, it looks really good. If you look at it from our retail space, these REACH codes look good. They pay for themselves in 15 years. If you look at it for office space, it pays for itself. These REACH codes work. The only category that I didn't see addressed in the studies was the life sciences and research. And so what I think we should do is consider passing these REACH codes for all those building types other than life sciences and research for now, where we would continue to study about the life sciences. And, I can see that times have changed in the life sciences, that our life science developers and companies really want to do the right things, but the issues are challenging. I'll just say that, but there's solutions that have changed over the years. For example, to have generators ready at the moment to supply power if the power goes down is a requirement for so many research labs that have ongoing tests and experiments that just have to have guaranteed power. Should those generators be supplied with natural gas, as most are now, or could they easily use our biodiesel, which is sold locally and is proven to be regular for regular diesel engines? This kind of investigation is needed. There's probably an issue at a time like this that the life sciences could go through and really reduce greenhouse gases. But we don't have the ability to do that right now. But I think we do have the ability to say that for all other uses in Emeryville, it really looks like these REACH codes work.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'll look to Member Pats to see if you have any questions or comments.
Just a complaint. I wish Member Medina had made her suggestion about spreading this out over multiple meetings before I spent night after night staying awake late reading about all this stuff. And it's much needed. You can see the impact of me missing beauty sleep. Don't be nodding there, Member Bowders. I see that. That said, I think her suggestion is absolutely warranted. I think this is something we want to really be thoughtful on and work through each item. And I like the idea of just tackling electrification this evening. And to Member Donahue's point, or to just the commenter's point in general, there is a need in, I think how to say this, the energy uses of both manufacturing and bioscience research is vastly different than in offices, retails, and homes. And treating them all the same is not going to get us where we need to be in town. So to reiterate, I support Member Medina's idea of narrowing the scope this evening and taking more time to be thoughtful. But if we need to make some decisions tonight, I think having an open mind for biotech research and manufacturing is an important thing.
Thank you. And then I'll bring it back to Member Bowders.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I support Councilmember Medina's recommendation of sending this back to committee and breaking this into more digestible pieces. In sending it back, I would just recommend the following things for the committee to consider. Parsing this into, you could do it a couple ways. You could do it by the subject areas, which I guess is what we've been talking about. The other way I would consider it is taking up residential issues first and looking at this through a residential lens. And the reason I recommend that is because we're going to need to begin the housing element process. And the timeliness of this is really germane to that conversation. I know I've put a pin in a couple items that we've talked about in the past year that I want to raise in the housing element discussion when we begin that. And with the significant increase in the RENA calculation that's been provided to us, what's really on my mind is not, kind of like doing a good thing on one hand and then like throwing it out the window with the other. And I'm concerned that we are doing all the right things on housing production. I'll come to non-housing in a second, but my concern is that while there's all this evidence that lower cost for producing energy efficient, that it saves money over the long term, Vice Mayor Donahue noted that already, which has that impact with other policies we have to make housing more affordable for people, and it could actually drive the cost of producing in particular affordable housing down, which would be a net benefit for us. Those are things I see as good things, but there isn't for me in any of the staff reports sufficient cost effectiveness of some of these interventions. I won't say all of them because I think the electrification one is probably provable to me, but the cementitious alternatives, some of these other things that were put out there, the installation and maintenance of solar panels, there isn't sufficient cost-effective information provided in these reports for me to feel comfortable saying, let's go ahead with a REACH code. Because in the end, I just don't want to saddle housing production with a burden that actually negates our goal of producing housing. I want it to be as sustainable as possible, but there's a balance, and that's what I'm trying to find out. On the non-residential side, I think that the big issue for me, and we heard from a couple people, is the lab and research space. And I would just note that like we are moving away from the brick and mortar retail economy, and that has happened and been hastened in the last year in a number of different ways. People are totally trying this work from home and shop online existence, and it's going to materially change the face of this city. And one of the positive things that's happened is there's been a huge interest and investment in growing the biohealth space here, and I think that's to our advantage as a community. So I think that it's just really important that before we enact a REACH code that even touches the column of lab research, I think that we need to have a very serious conversation with the stakeholders in that community about what is feasible, what is perhaps doable in 5, 10, or 15 years, and what we can do to maybe make build our city in a way that evolves with those changes, but doesn't mandate them out the door, so that we can actually do economic recovery as well. And then I would just note that Marin County, some of these places that have enacted these things, I just am worried that some of the reasons are a backdoor to avoiding housing obligations, and that they're actually being posited as, oh, we're going to do this really green thing, but it's actually designed to not produce housing. So that Marin County was just a red flag for me. They always have been. And then lastly, when we engage community stakeholders, I just ask that we include the people who, I heard that we had this forum. I didn't hear how many people attended. 1,000 were invited, but I didn't hear how many attended. I heard from one public speaker, they weren't clear coming out of it what was the next steps. That the labor community be involved in this process, because this also has an economic impact on our community. Who is building what and what we're doing, and what is efficient or cost effective, and what materials work or don't work. The people who build those things know that as well. So not just developers and business owners, but I think that the people who actually are in the construction trades are people we need to consult in the process. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Member Bowders. I agree with the direction that just a moment, Scott, let me get my comments in first. I agree with the direction that this should go back to committee and come back in bite-sized chunks. I think there are a lot of areas where we could get some better information. I liked Member Bowders' suggestion of having a cost-benefit analysis grid that's specific to the types of buildings that we do here in Emeryville. Specifically for me, I'd like to see some case study information on our residential building types, because there's a little example that came in our staff report, but I would love to see, or I would be tickled to see a home in Emeryville, a single family home that's 2,430 square feet. I don't think we have one, but if we do, it's not the norm. So I'd really like to know for the smaller single family homes, and then we're a majority multifamily dwellings in this city. So I'd like to know what the implications are on the cost side for those types of buildings. I do have concerns on the building codes for the reasons that have already been raised about there not being a direct supply line for what we would be legislating. So I want to be really, really careful that we're not writing an ordinance for requiring people to use a mix of concrete that doesn't exist. I think that can be a big problem. So I think we're all on the same page tonight in terms of sending this back to committee. I think everyone is supportive of electrification overall, but I hear that we want to be careful about how we craft this to be sensitive to our lab space and future lab space in this city, as we are unique in the amount of land that we have zoned for that very specific use. And Member Donahue has additional comments, so I will recognize you at this time.
I just want to say that the change in concrete has been developed for 30 or 40 years. Traditionally, it just costs a little more. It's an additive to the concrete, and that makes it so you use less cement. It's called fly ash. It's a known technology. It's no big deal. Even if Marin uses it, it still would be good for us. Okay, another subject. This is an important thing for our city going forward because, housing is a significant piece of greenhouse gas for our future. And, making decisions in the design period will affect the lifespan of the building. So it's important that we follow through and be smart about how we build our buildings to reduce our greenhouse gases. And we can do that. We are a city that is thoughtful, and we should follow through, and we will follow through. And I would thoroughly work at it at our committee to come back to the council with recommendations.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Donahue. I'll recognize Member Bowders.
Yeah, in light of that, just one last thing that if the committee could consider the collateral impacts on other natural resources. So something that often happens at the Air District is when we regulate something like track out or cement plants, there's oftentimes we'll implement a rule that says you have to reduce the emissions of dust or other things that, noxious gases, radicals. We have this whole categories of things. And one of the most common things is you have to actually create or design at these facilities places where there's something like a mister or a sprayer that actually has to regularly spray the material, which may be more GHG friendly in terms of emission reductions when it's put out in the community, but at the place where it's being sourced, it actually leads to higher water consumption. And so I would just ask, I don't know enough about the cement alternatives that were presented, and there wasn't a lot of science about them provided in the staff report, but if that is something that the committee or staff really feel we should look at, and I don't know enough about fly ash, Scott, but if I just want to know more about does moving to that, does that actually increase consumption of other natural resources? Because if in the end we're going to reduce carbon, but we're potentially also going to dramatically reduce or increase water consumption and reduce water preservation issues, then I would just want to know what the offsetting balances are.
Thank you, Member Bowders. And my concerns were more related to supply and availability, especially as it pertains to smaller development, as it pertains to renovations, as it pertains to, someone who owns a little bungalow and they need to replace a piece of their path. And I want to remove obstacles to people caring for their homes properly. So, Member Bedina.
Yeah. Thank you. It sounds like we have a consensus to take these back and kind of bring them back piece by piece, or residential versus non-residential, which I also think is a good approach. And so I will work with staff to do so at our committee. I would love to get some feedback, because I think the first piece that I do want to tackle is electrification. If everyone is in general agreement with part one of the electrification recommendation, which is new construction of low-rise and high-rise residential occupancies must be all electric, and then allow us to discuss some options for part two for non-residential and bring those back to this body.
Great. And do we do that? Do you want to do this with a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or folks?
Yeah, thumbs up, thumbs down for that.
Because I am in favor of that portion of it at this point. I can tell you that.
Sorry, Christian and John, I cannot see your thumb.
I'm generally supportive. I just want to know if I would just want to know offsets. In other words, if we go to electrification, would that exclude some person from our community who maybe unbeknownst to me can't live here without some sort of device or facility that requires gas? Like that's the only concern I have is, does it have an offset or a consequence of excluding someone? That's all I want to know.
I got you. Okay, so I think we'll prioritize coming back with electrification, and I'll work to consider the housing element timeline and how we structure everything else as it comes back to this committee. So thank you so much for your feedback on this large body of information.
Thank you, Member Medina. I want to recognize our city manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just one clarifying question. I was looking at my notes with regard to the question about electrification of residential. I had heard at least one, if not a couple, council members asking for a cost effectiveness analysis on that question. So I just wanted to clarify, is that still being requested, or are you saying move forward without that?
I would like to have that information presented concurrently. Member Donahue?
If you actually look at what was provided, the hundreds of pages, that for residential was in fact showed that it is cost effective in our climate zone.
Thank you, Scott. Just really attach that to the next packet.
Okay.
So,
that work
I'm
has
sure
been
you
done.
did. It's just, it was a lot of reading.
Yes.
Madam Mayor, just to clarify, what I thought I heard was specific to the building types that are predominant here in Emeryville.
Yes, please. Not giant single family homes with a pool and AC blasting 75% of the year, because that's not how our folks live.
Are you referring to what is the American dream, Diane, for 100?
All right, colleagues, thank you. And I also, I don't want to be remiss in thanking staff, Mary Grace and Nancy, in what is a huge endeavor. Thank you, Farhad, for all of your assistance in this. And I want to thank all of the stakeholders, those who spoke up tonight, who will continue to be involved in the process. I hope you will attend those sustainability committee meetings. That will be a public forum for you to weigh in, to provide public comment, to let our committee know your thoughts on the direction that we're heading. And then, of course, this will come back to City Council for further consideration. But thank you, everyone, for your collective efforts on this. And we will move on to our next item on the agenda. That is item 12.3. This is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Emeryville adopting the Affordable Housing Bond Administration and Expenditure Plan and appointing the Budget Advisory Committee to serve as the Bond Oversight Committee. So do we have a staff report on this? I see Chad and Valerie both entered the room.
Hi, this is Valerie. I do actually have a presentation. Sherry, if you could pull that up for me.
I am looking for it as we speak. One moment.
Valerie, thank you in advance for all of your work on this. I'm really happy to see this back for our stamp tonight.
Everyone seeing that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you guys very much for having us here tonight. Again, my name is Valerie Bernardo. I'm the housing coordinator within the Economic Development and Housing Division of the Community Development Department. And I am back before you this evening to talk about the Affordable Housing Administration and Expenditure Plan. Next slide, please. Just to give you guys a little background, this presentation is going to be very similar to the one that was provided at the study session in December, but I have reduced it and provided a little bit of updated information just as to how we got here. In February of 2018, the City Council did request a $50 million housing bond be placed on the ballot. That ballot occurred in June of 2018, and over 2/3 of the residents did vote to support the Measure C housing bond. In December of 2020, we actually presented the draft affordable housing bond expenditure and admin plan to the Housing Committee, and they did recommend submitting an approval recommendation to the City Council. And then in December, we also came to the City Council and did a study session. During that study session, we had a couple of questions that we had asked the council to provide some feedback on before we actually brought the plan back for City Council approval. And so those recommendations are incorporated into the plan that we'll discuss today. Next slide, please. Again, just to give a brief overview of what is in the plan, there's a section, and I'm going to touch on each one of these very briefly. There is a background of how we got to the plan, which we just discussed. There's a section that'll talk about our Emeryville affordable housing resources, what the objective, purpose, and use of the housing bond is, what the initiatives, programs, and projects that we're looking to fund. There's a funding plan, performance measurements, accountability measures, and then of course there's an overall program summary. Next slide, please. Okay. So what we have here is a determination of all of our affordable housing resources. In the plan, it's actually broken down into financial resources as well as physical assets. The physical assets represent our city and successor agency owned assets. And I thought that it was important to incorporate that into the plan because as we move forward and trying to redevelop those are initiatives and projects we definitely want to identify resources so that we can develop those housing sites. When it comes to our affordable housing resources outside of the $50 million Measure C housing bond, we did identify several other funding resources. The consumption of all of those resources totals $64.5 million. This is a slightly different number than what was presented back in December. And the reason for that variation is previously we were working off of an estimation of revenue that was going to be received. We actually went back and ran a more comprehensive financial report, and we are now basing it off of revenue that we actually have received as of January. And so we're at $64.5 million. I think before we were at 64.2. So it's an increase of about $300,000 in funding, which primarily came from our affordable housing fund. Next slide, please. So with the housing Measure C bond, there are a requirement that the bonds be used for a very specific purpose. And the intention of this plan is to say that purpose that's used for the Measure C funds would also be the purpose for all of our other housing resource funds. And those purposes and objectives include the acquisition of real property, the rehabilitation of real property, to acquire additional affordability commitments in some of our existing developments in Emeryville, to assist home buyers in the purchase and to stay in the community. So that would also ensure that existing homeowners have resources available to maintain their homes in Emeryville. We want to ensure that we're preventing displacement, and we also want to ensure that we're providing permanent supportive housing. Next slide. So our affordable housing plan is broken down into two different initiatives, preservation and production. The preservation initiative is designed to preserve the existing supply and quality of affordable housing here in Emeryville, to prevent displacement of existing very low, and moderate income tenants, and to reserve existing housing for our special needs population. So within the preservation program, we actually have within the preservation initiative, we actually have 5 programs that we've identified. The retention of BMR homeownership units, homebuyer assistance, foreclosure prevention, rental preservation, as well as special need housing programs. The production initiative is designed to designed to build new affordable housing units for very low and moderate income households and individuals. And we have 2 programs within that initiative. First one being rental development program for our existing housing portfolio, and then a housing opportunities program. Next slide, please. So just to give you a brief overview of what the various programs are, the acquisition of BMR homebuyer units, the goal for that is to preserve the affordability restrictions on BMR homeownership units for households that are low to moderate income. The description that would associate with that program is that we're really going to go after some of our existing BMR units that are at risk of being foreclosed or becoming market rate units. And we would actually go in and acquire that property to retain the affordability. The second program is our home buyer assistance, and our goal for that program is to assist low to moderate income households become homeowners. Funding would be provided in the source of down payment assistance and closing cost assistance in the form of a deferred loan. The third program is foreclosure prevention, and this would assist existing low to moderate income households retain their homes by preventing foreclosure. Funding would be provided to the homeowner in the form of a deferred loan and could be utilized to provide assistance to cover back homeowner association dues or provide mortgage assistance if necessary. Next slide, please. The fourth program is rental preservation. The goal of this program is to preserve approximately 160 existing rental units for very low and moderate income tenants. Funding could be provided to property owners to make capital needs improvements to the property or to those units that are occupied by income eligible tenants. And then the fifth preservation program is special need housing incentives. Funding, the goal for this program would be to acquire about 15 additional rental units to be used to set aside for very low to moderate income special need households. This is what we would call the ability of acquiring additional affordability units. The targeted special need populations would vary from disabled, transitional age youth, homeless, but again, it would be going after our existing portfolio and acquiring additional BMR units specifically for the special need population. Next slide, please. So within our preservation initiative, we're allocating about $11.7 million. There's a little bit over 1.5 million going to our BMR homeownership acquisition program, 1.95 going to our homeownership assistance program, 150,000 allocated to foreclosure prevention, $4 million allocated to rental preservation, and $4,050,000 allocated to our special needs housing opportunities. Next slide, please. Now we're going into our production programs, and we have two of those. The first one being rental development. Again, this is funding that would be dedicated to our existing housing assets. We would look to produce about 318 new rental units within those properties for very low and moderate income tenants. All this funding would go into the new construction of development on those sites. And then our second program is called Development Opportunities. We would develop new affordable housing projects for very low and moderate income households. Funding would be provided in the form of a loan, and this would allow the city or development partners to strategically go after acquisitions or do other housing developments in the city that have not already been identified as an asset that has a city interest on it. Next slide, please. The bulk of the funding for our housing plan is going to our production initiative. It's about $49.4 million. The rental production program would have about $41 million allocated to it, and our development opportunities would have $8.3 million allocated. Next slide, please. In order to properly administer the affordable housing bond, we did identify that there is a need to allocate funding for administration as well as the cost to cover the issuance of the bond. So we've identified about 5% of the Measure C housing bond, which is about $2.5 million, would be allocated to cover administrative costs. Those costs would include staff time, professional consultants, costs for an audit. Additionally, we wanted to include within the administration of this program an ability for the city manager to make independent or aggregate budget modifications so that we could make sure that we're being able to be as flexible and move with the market conditions. Any need for any budget modification in excess of 20% would have to go back before the city council and the bond oversight committee before we could make that move, but the city manager would have some administrative authority up to the 20%. The cost of issuance, we're allocating about $807,000 to cover that. That would cover all the funding necessary to pay for our bond and disclosure counsel, our financial advisor, our paying agent, as well as the rating fee. Next slide, please. So this is our funding plan. Again, we're at $64.56793 million. This is a breakdown of each funding program. or initiative, however you want to look at it, based on each funding resource. We have the Low and Moderate Income Housing Asset Fund that has about $5.92 million available for that. The Affordable Housing Fund, which $5.342 million. The Affordable Housing Impact Fee, a little bit over $734,000. Our A1 County Bond allocation, which is $2.519 million. And then, of course, the Measure C bond. And then you can see on this chart how all of those funding resources are allocated across all the different initiatives and programs and then subsequent projects. Next slide, please. I'm showing here an example of what the Measure C expenditure plan would look like. We are anticipating to do 2 tranches. The first tranche is where the bonds would be issued in spring of 2022. The second tranche would come in winter of 2025. It's important to know that each tranche, we must expend at least 85% of the funds within 3 years and 100% of the funds within 5 years. The first tranche we're looking at issuing about $17.4 million, and then the balance of that would be issued in the second tranche. And so we've developed a plan that does identify how those funds are anticipated to be rolled out and how we would need to expend the funds in order to ensure that we meet the expenditure timelines for each tranche of funds. Next slide, please. Within the housing plan, we do have performance measures. One of the things we talked about last time is that there are all of the units that are anticipated to be developed utilizing these funds would target either low, very low, or moderate income households. We are anticipating that a subcomponent of all the units developed would target those with special needs. And right now we're looking at about 22% of the units to be developed to target those with special needs. I have included information regarding how this relates back to our RHNA. And so you'll see that of the units that are going to be impacted, which is 603, 379 of those units would actually impact our RHNA. And the reason it's only 379 is because the RHNA only looks at the new construction of units. So it would not count funding that's provided for home buyer assistance to do any housing renovation, only those new construction units. And we are looking at 51% of those new production units going towards very low income households, 28% going towards low, and then 21% going towards moderate, which aligns not exactly, but pretty close to what our projections are for the RHNA. Next slide, please. This is just another recap, again, as to how those production of those units would impact our RHNA. I will say that our RHNA cycle will actually expand beyond, or I'm sorry, our units will actually expand beyond the current RHNA cycle. So I'm only showing the impact for the current RHNA cycle. We currently have 1,092 building permit units that have been issued up until 2020. We're anticipating that in 22 to 23 through 3,600 San Pablo and 4,300 San Pablo, we would have another 158. So this just chart shows how that'll impact where we are in the RHNA. And then I also just wanted to remind everybody that within the Affordable Housing Bond, we did have an Article 34 authority that was provided. We have 3 units remaining from Measure E, which was from 1978, and 500 units remaining from the Measure C, and we're only projected to use 379 of those units. So there will also be a balance remaining after this affordable housing plan if additional units come online. Next slide, please. Accountability measures. So with any bond issuance, there's always a requirement that there are accountability measures that would be provided back to the city council and the public. The first one is that the council must identify a bond oversight committee who has the capacity of overseeing all the financial transactions and ensuring that the bond funded projects comply with the object and purpose of the bonds. It has been recommended from city council that the budget advisory committee fulfill this capacity through the study session that happened in December. So that recommendation is included in the resolution tonight. We also wanted to identify that there is also still a role, however, for a housing committee. The housing committee will provide review and recommendations on the affordable housing plan, which they've actually already done. But over the next year, year and a half, we will also be working on developing the housing program guidelines for the various programs, the objective standards. And of course, anytime we have a notice of funding availability related to one of the programs, they would assist in providing funding recommendations. And then lastly, we wanted to make sure that there was an annual report that would be provided back to the City Council. That report would go before the Housing Committee and Bond Oversight Committee, and then be forwarded on to the City Council. That would just provide an annual update on the progress of all the programs, expenditures, and then the performance of the units that are being developed. Next slide, please. So what action are we asking for everybody today? There are actually 3 in the resolution. The first one is the adoption of the Affordable Housing Bonded Administration and Expenditure Plan. The second one is appointing the Budget Advisory Committee to serve in the capacity of the Bond Oversight Committee. And the third one is to authorize the city manager to make budget modifications independently or in the aggregate of up to 20% at the program level. And with that, I will be available to answer any additional questions that the council may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. I will look to my colleagues to see if there are any clarifying questions before we go to public comment, and I will recognize Member Bowders.
Thanks. Thanks, Valerie. Fantastic. I really appreciate your work. Just 2 quick questions. Can you clarify on the administrative costs, the authority given to the city manager? You kept saying, you know, and I saw it on the page too, up to 20%, but it didn't make it clear of what. Is it of a given expenditure that was budgeted, or was it of some other thing?
It would be make a budget modification up to 20% at the program level. So we're not looking at an individual project, but at the program level. So the funding is broken down by initiative, programs, and projects. So at the program level, and you'll see, like, let's say that homebuyer assistance, I think, had the 1.95. So 20% of that allocation could be adjusted up to a different initiative and so forth.
I understand now. Okay, thank you. And then the other quick question was just the first tranche of money includes money for the Christie properties. Can you just refresh my memory, because we've been over this a bunch of times, but there's so much to this, and I really appreciate how you laid this all out. On the Christie properties, is that mostly to do just to get started and do environmental and other design? I'm seeing the city manager nod, so that's my question. Okay.
Yes, and actually there's actually a portion of funding that's allocated outside of the bond. So the tranches actually relate to the $50 million, but we have allocated $250,000 coming from one of the existing financial resources of funds we have on hand, so that we can start in doing some of that pre-development work. We have until September of 2021 to get started on some type of a pre-development work on that site. So we wanted to make sure that we can go ahead and meet that deadline. So we have funding set aside from another resource to go ahead and start that work. But we do anticipate trying to move forward and do some additional development work so that we can get that property redeveloped. Not at the end of the plan, but hopefully get started in doing that towards the middle of the plan.
Great. Thank you very much. That's my only questions.
Thank you. Are there any other clarifying questions before we go to public comment? And I don't see. So I will check with our city clerk to see if anyone has submitted speaker cards or electronic submittals.
I don't have any at this time, no.
I don't see any hands raised. And to remind folks, if you are joining by Zoom, please use the raise hand feature to be recognized. Or if you are joining by phone, please hit *9. And I am watching the attendees list to see if there are any raised hands. And I do not see any. So I will close public comment and bring this back to my colleagues for discussion. Are there any other comments or questions for staff? And I don't see any. I also would like to thank staff for making a very clear presentation and bringing this back to us repeatedly for consideration. And we have a resolution before us that includes all of the 3 actions that staff is asking us to take tonight. Do I have a motion on the resolution?
I'd like to move the resolution, and my dog apparently seconds it.
I think Raina moved it.
Yeah, I think she beat me to it. She barks for housing. What can I say?
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion by Member Bowders and Raina and a second by Vice Mayor Donahue. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders?
Aye.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Pats?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Donahue?
Aye.
And Mayor Martinez.
Aye. And we come to item 12.4. This is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Emeryville confirming the City of Emeryville as a sponsor of SB 591, state legislation concerning intergenerational housing, and authorizing the mayor to sign a letter of support. And looking to see if we have a presentation from staff.
Madam Mayor, what we have for you tonight actually is we're going to ask Councilmember Bowders to speak to this. He has been working with our lobbyist, Nicolo DeLuca, on this measure quite in depth and has a lot of familiarity with it. I believe we may also have, Chad is joined us, but we may also have representatives from EAH who are joining us this evening, or maybe communicating through Chad with regard to their perception of or their support of the legislation. As you'll recall, they are the selected developer for 4300 San Pablo. So Councilmember Bowders, if you don't mind, we'd like you to speak to this item.
Yeah, thank you. So just as briefly as possible, we had a conversation. This dates back to the 4300 San Pablo RFP when we recalled it as a senior only project, and the housing committee and then the city council confirmed giving staff direction to put this RFP out for intergenerational housing, which allows for the co-location in a single building of seniors age 55 and plus alongside transition age youth, which in California and in most circumstances is defined as youth who are either exiting the foster care system, formerly homeless youth, and or juvenile justice involved youth who are returning home from being in custody. That's generally up to an age of 24 or 5, depends on the group that you're in there. But currently, federal law allows for housing tax credits to finance structure where both types of dedicated affordable housing could be co-located. However, under California law, there is a California law that prohibits that from happening. It requires that to finance it, they have to be separate buildings if they're on the same property, which creates some unreasonable logistical and financing issues, as well as construction related issues for developers. So when EAH and others bid for this project, they flagged for us that there was a legislation issue here. There was a bill that had been proposed last year, but most bills were tabled or just left to die because of the COVID crisis. And so the author for that bill was Assemblymember Rivas. He was made the chair of Ag this year, and he chose not to pick this bill back up due to other demands he would have in his legislative portfolio. And so worked very closely with Nicolo and Townsend, and we met with close to a dozen offices of legislators to talk about this proposal. We've had a series of meetings with the Assembly Housing Committee. EAH joined us in some of those meetings, as well as Pedro from NPH, the Nonprofit Housing Association of Northern California. And the outcome of that is that Senator Josh Becker from across the Bay in San Mateo County did agree to be the author of this bill. We picked up with the legislative language that was last available. I will tell you that that is not our preferred language, but we did that strategically. I won't go into all those details, but there's a very strategic reason why we took the last legislative language and introduced that there. The bill will enjoy support. We've already had conversations with the city of Oakland, the city of Berkeley, and the city of San Leandro about officially supporting this bill. NPH is likely to be a co-sponsor of the bill. I know Scott is here, EAH, Mid-Penn Housing, Bridge, some of the other affordable housing developers will likely support this. And I have had a meeting with the California State Child Welfare Roundtable, and the child welfare advocates who represent foster and homeless youth are also very excited about this bill. There is potentially one opponent to the bill, which is a group that advocates for senior affordable housing who have concerns about senior housing being taken away in their mind for youth. And we look forward to engaging in a conversation with them about that and helping explain further the social and health benefits of this type of housing, and that it's not actually going to decrease housing. It's simply going to allow for a diversified stock to be increased. So that's kind of the capturing of the bill. The bill language, I believe, was provided by staff in the staff report. If you have specific questions about the housing finance structure, Scott is here. If you have questions about the legislative process or what will happen next, I'm here, but we are asking for council to approve allowing Mayor Martinez to sign a letter on behalf of the city formally sponsoring the legislation before it goes to first committee. That would be, I'll take questions. Otherwise, Madam Mayor, I turn it back to you.
Yep. Nope. Just looking out for any questions from colleagues. And seeing none, I will check in with our city clerk to see if anyone has submitted public comment or if any hands are raised. And folks, if you are joining by Zoom, you can use the raise hand feature on your screen, or if you are calling in, please press *9 to be recognized. Sherry, do you have any submissions?
I do not.
Okay, just giving it a second, and I don't see anyone raising their hands amongst the attendees. So I will close public comment, bring it back to colleagues for discussion. Any notes from anyone? Member Medina.
Yeah, sorry, I do have a question. Is there an assembly co-sponsor, or will there be one soon?
There's a number of co-sponsors already. So when we met with everybody, the issue is that the legislature, typically they get between 20 and 40 bills in a 2-year session, as I know you know, Councilmember Medina.
Yeah, they're down to 12.
They're down to 12. They're only allowed to have 12 because of managing bill load with COVID issues. And as a consequence of that, a lot of people picked up the bills they had last year who were incumbents, and they kept their bills, so they didn't actually want new bills. And that's what our challenge was this year. But we were able to get a new legislator to pick up this bill. And so, yes, there are co-sponsors. Senator Skinner and Assemblymember Wicks will both be co-sponsoring this legislation. So our district will, they couldn't pick it up because they already had committed their bill package due to prior year, as I mentioned, but we will have ample co-sponsors on this legislation.
Excellent. Thank you so much for all your hard work on this.
Mm-hmm.
Any more comments? Okay, I would like to give a deep thank you to Member Bowders and to Nicolo DeLuca for the many, many meetings and the lots of beating down doors to make this happen. This is, I would like to ask staff when this passes if we could have noisemakers or confetti or something, because this is going to be a really big deal. And I'm excited to see this already with so much support. So thank you so much for all of the work that you've done and continue to do on this matter, Member Bowders. So with that, it looks like we don't have any more discussion. We've got a resolution, excuse me. It's not a resolution, and I have lost place.
Yes, it is, Madam Mayor. It is a resolution.
It is a resolution. So we have a resolution that encompasses all of the direction we will be giving staff. So do I have a motion on the resolution?
I move the resolution.
Thank you, Member Donahue, and I will second it. So I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll at this time.
Councilmember Bowders.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Pats.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Donahue.
Aye.
And Mayor Martinez.
Aye. Thank you, everyone, for that.
Thank you for being here, Scott, and for to EAH for hanging out with us this year. I appreciate it.
A shout out to Council Member Bowders. Seriously.
Yes. Thank you for coming, Scott.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
Okay, talk to you soon. All right, so that will move us over to department head reports. And I see Charlie in the attendees list. Can he be promoted up to, there you go. I believe we have a...
Madam Mayor, I have to recuse from 13B and C, so if you could just take 13A so I can leave the dais, that would be great.
Charlie, if you don't mind reporting on 13A first, and then we will excuse Member Bowders.
Certainly. Thank you, Mayor Martinez and members of the City Council. This is my report on the most recent Planning Commission meeting, which was last Thursday, February 25th. They had 3 items on their agenda, as you can see listed here on your agenda. And the first item was the General Plan Annual Report, which they unanimously recommended be forwarded to the City Council with a recommendation that you approve it. And we do have that scheduled for your next meeting on March 16th. Oh, and I see Councilmember Bowders has already left. So shall I continue?
There he goes. So let's go ahead with items B and C.
All right, thank you. So there were also 2, I'm sorry, I forgot to say one important thing. As you know, we have 2 vacancies currently on the Planning Commission. So we have 5 members right now, and all 5 members were in attendance at the meeting, and that first item was approved unanimously, 5-0, the recommendation on the General Plan Annual Report.
The second item was a public hearing on the Sherwin-Williams Building 131 adaptive use. This was a rehearing of a project that they had previously unanimously approved on December 10th. However, unfortunately, we subsequently realized that we had a noticing defect at that hearing, and so we had to redo the hearing and redo the approval. Once again, they approved it unanimously, this time 5-0. And then the third item was the BMR Emeryville Center of Innovation, which is a final development plan for the build out of the Novartis portion of the Chiron planned unit development. There were two resolutions before the commission. One was on the final development plan itself. The other was one on a proposed tree removal permit. On the final development plan, they did approve that unanimously. Commissioner Mendez is recused on this project because of a conflict of interest with her employment. So there were 4 commissioners present for this item, which was a bare quorum, but fortunately we did have 4 there participating. They approved the resolution on the FDP unanimously 4-0. They did make some modifications to the conditions of approval, including related to the diverter at Stanford and Horton Street, cycle tracks along Horton Street and 53rd, and also related to the trees, where a new tree plan was presented, which would preserve many more trees than had previously been proposed. So I think it's a net gain of about 40 trees. Again, that was approved 4-0. And then the tree removal permit resolution was also approved 4-0. The application was to remove 22 street trees. The staff recommendation, which the commission approved, was to remove only 9 trees, the ones in front of the proposed parking garage on Horton Street, and to not approve the removal of the remaining 13 trees on another section of Horton Street and 53rd Street, and also to require the payment of a replacement value fee for the 9 trees to be removed. And again, that resolution was also passed unanimously 4-0. Both the Sherwin-Williams item and the BMR item are appealable to the City Council within 15 days. That would be next Friday, March 12th, would be the appeal deadline. And of course, this is the council's opportunity to appeal any of these items to yourselves if you wish to do so. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to respond to any questions.
Okay, thank you. Member Medina.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bryant. Can you clarify for me, the cycle tracks that were approved, are those raised cycle tracks?
Yes. Yes, that was one of the changes, is that the cycle, it was ambiguous previously, and they changed it to they will be raised cycle tracks.
To sidewalk grade?
It wasn't specified exactly that. The details of the design will be worked out by the Public Works Department, but they will be raised above the roadway level.
Okay, is there a minimum definition in NACA standards for what a raised cycle track is?
I would have to get back to you on that. I'm not sure what the exact definition is, but it definitely.
Yeah, I'm just asking because in my mind, there's a difference between like pouring 1 inch of concrete or cement and then pouring like 6 inches to get it up to grade.
Yes,
so I would appreciate clarification if you can get that back to me.
Certainly, I will do that.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions for our planning director? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Charlie. Appreciate it. And can I ask staff to please text Member Bowders in case he would like.
I just brought him back.
Oh, thank you. Did you just leave him in the waiting room?
I made him an attendee.
Okay. Very good. Well, that concludes that item, and now we can move on to future agenda item requests from council members. And oh, yes, I'll recognize our city manager.
Just with regard to future agenda items, I'm not exactly sure where to bring this in, so I thought this was an appropriate time. It relates to an item that had tentatively been scheduled for your March 16th agenda, which was a study session on the Ashby Interchange Western Conform. And this is the ACTC project. Staff had a prep meeting today with ACTC staff, and we learned that Caltrans, actually it's a Caltrans funded project. Caltrans actually needs more time to consult with BCDC about the impacts of sea level rise on the project. And so we would be bringing this back at a later date before the end of the fiscal year, but not at your March 16th meeting. So we apologize for that, but we learned that information today. So we'll be rescheduling that item for a later date.
Okay, thank you, Madam City Manager. And I saw a hand raised by Member Medina.
Thank you so much. I'd ask to have the City Council consider a resolution in support of SB 271. It's been introduced by Senator Weiner. SB 271 proposes to eliminate the Hennessy Amendment from 1987 that added a requirement for law enforcement experience for sheriff candidates. So I'd love if the City Council would consider a resolution in support of this. Their committee hearing is March 16th, so we're not going to get it in time, but I have a resolution prep to bring, so we could do it at the next meeting if staff is amenable to that.
Does staff have questions, comments?
We publish on Friday, so if you can get it to us tomorrow.
I can get it to you tonight.
Very good. Member Bowders.
I'm in the same vein tonight as Councilmember Medina. I have a resolution for a piece of legislation I'd like us to support, Assembly Bill 1400 by Assemblymember Ash Kalra, which is the Medicare for All bill. And so I would like to just also have that put on the agenda at the same time, and I have a draft resolution I can send you in 2 minutes.
Support. Did we get enough thumbs? Okay, very good. So we've got support for both of those items. Are there any other future items requested by members? Okay, seeing none, I think we're prepared to adjourn this meeting. It is 9:29 and this meeting is so adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night, everybody.